All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and I'm here today with Lizzie Ens. I was about to overthink that again, but Lizzie Ens, she is an author, public speaker, board certified functional nutrition practitioner. She also has a book, Escaping My Reflection, A Pilgrimage from Suppression to Freedom. Man, welcome to the Shadows.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And also, it's an honor.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We
Yeah.
definitely connected a couple weeks back. Finally, you're able to hit the record button. So I'm very, very excited for this. Just to let our listeners know, where are you located at right now?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. Okay. It's probably
West
very nice
Coast.
weather.
Yeah, it's actually gotten it has been a really cool spring, but now that it's hit April, literally this weekend it's gonna hit 100. So it's like not even easing into it. It's just gonna be like, all right, we're here.
I I actually liked the dry heat when I was out there. I
I like
enjoyed
the
it.
dry heat.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
not. You kind of know what to expect year round with weather, with the exception of like the monsoon season.
Yeah, which the monsoon season can be fun, depending on the storms. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of fun to have those. The worst part is like if you have 115 or 120 degrees and it's like it doesn't cool down at night and it's still 110 degrees at 9 o'clock at night and you're like, oh, give me a break.
yeah.
That's the worst part. But other than that, you just go get in the pool and you figure it out.
Yeah, drink, hydrate.
Yep,
Hydrate, you'll be fine. All
that's
right. Well,
right.
to get going here, I'm going to start you off with some rapid fire questions. First one, what is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Croissants.
Okay. All right. You were pretty quick to answer that too.
That is one of my go-tos. I went to France last year. I was in France in July, and oh my goodness. Like I don't generally eat gluten here in America because it just doesn't do well with me. But I grew up with lots of pastries, so
Yeah.
pastries are my thing. But we never had croissants when I was growing up. But when I discovered them, I was like, oh my gosh, where have these been all my life? But going to France and experiencing the croissants, and I'm probably saying that wrong because someone corrected me one time, like how I'm saying that. I'm like, well, I'll just blame it on my accent, but the French call it say it a little bit different. But the croissants over there are just like
It's a whole nother
untouched.
level.
It's a whole nother level, along with their coffee, and you
Hmm.
pair that with the coffee and a croissant. It's untouched. Like you can't. And I could eat it there and not get sick.
It's my daughter's go-to in
Yeah,
France was croissants as well. Yeah.
it's amazing.
All
Yeah.
right. Book recommendation outside of your book.
Outside of my book, I think it depends on the what it is that you're wanting to learn. I always like to read books that I learn something from, but the one that really stands out to me at the moment, and I'm referring it to a lot of people, is Rich as Fuck by
Okay.
Amanda. No, I can't think of what her last name is, but it's one of those books that it's an easy read, but she has a degree in psychology
Hmm.
and she teaches about the mindset of money and how to think of money differently, and it's an energy and it comes and goes, and it and talks about debt and how certain debt can actually benefit you, those kinds of things. And she just did an amazing job with the book. I listened to the Audible twice and I have the physical book as well. It just really changes your mindset about money.
Okay.
So that's
That
a
one
really
will
good
be
one.
listed along with your book under the resource recommendations on our website.
Awesome.
You could have a job for a day. What would you do?
If I could have a job for a day, what would I do?
Dream job.
Ooh. I have never thought about that before. A dream job. Hmm.
So like you're asked
That's
to
a
go on like undercover boss and you get to do like one job for a day. What would it be?
oh, I want to be a secret agent.
Secret agent.
Hmm.
Okay. I could see it. I could see it with the look. I could see you being the secret agent role.
Oh
Let me
yeah.
ask you this. Flip side of that. One job you would never want to have.
One job I would never want to have, to sew my own clothes.
Okay. Okay.
I did that growing up and I
Yeah.
want nothing to do with it now.
Okay. I like how specific these answers are. This is really good. Uh, what is something that you geek out about?
The physiology and anatomy of the body.
Okay. So anatomy and physiology was a course that I struggled more than any other course in college when I first got like the Tabor's dictionary and I just weren't getting along,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I eventually got there.
Yeah, it's it has to be something that's a really like intriguing and an interest of yours.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't know that I was such a into so much into it until I went to personal training school, and I just like geeked out over memorizing the anatomy of the body. And then when I studied functional nutrition, it went internal a lot more, and the physiology and the science behind how everything works from the inside out.
Mhm.
And it's just something that like it really really gets me going, and I love learning. So I get when I do schooling like that, I get really creative and I come
Yeah.
up with new things that I can help people with.
Okay.
So
And then final
yeah.
question for you. Dinner for three historical figures who are no longer with us. Who do you break croissants with?
You know, that's a really tough question because historical figures aren't really like anything. Like I don't know a lot of historical figures.
Okay. Well, we'll just go
Because
with one. You could wine and dine
with
with one
one
person. Who would it be?
with one person. Oh my gosh. That's another tough one. I never even like gave that a thought.
So
Who
while
would
you're
I want to
thinking,
break a croissant with?
I'll I'll stall you for a minute.
Do
So
it.
this is usually the one question that people will hear on episodes, and they're like, I know this question's coming. I dread this question. And then whenever I ask it to them, they're like, I don't know who my three are. So they have to really think about it.
Historical. Um, Probably Steve Jobs.
All right, Steve Jobs is definitely a good one.
Just because I'm really really intrigued by like what he built
Yeah.
and the way that he did it. I heard one time that he even what's really interesting is I heard one time like he even though like he built Apple and all of these like things we get addicted to, he never allowed his kids to have an iPad or an iPhone
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
because he understood the addiction behind it and what it
Yeah,
does to our brains.
that's interesting. Yeah, I've read
Yeah.
about him a lot more in the past couple of years, but yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Well, you survived. You
I
survived.
survived.
Yep. That was the hard part. The rest is going to be
Some
easy.
of them were a lot harder than others. Like so one thing that I literally just told someone this yesterday. I was like, I don't really get starstruck. So when you ask about historical figures, I'm like, oh, this is why I can't think of a historical figure because I don't really get starstruck. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to meet this person.
My
Yeah.
best answer that I've had was I had Aaron Conrad, who very good friend of mine. He was on here and he said his was Jesus, his mom, and Freddie Mercury from Queen. So that's
Wow.
interesting group. But he said that's also going to be the name of his next book. So all right, well, you survived, and now speaking of books, you've written a book, which we're going to get into in just a moment. But usually I ask people like, hey, what was it like growing up? Tell us about, the suburbs that you grew up in and, about your aspirations as a kid. Your story is a lot
Yeah.
different than every
Yeah.
single guest that I've had on here up to this point. So please let our listeners know about Lizzie's young childhood growing up.
Awesome. So I grew up in an Amish community until the age of 19. So I lived there from the time I was born until I ran away at 19. And if you don't know anything about the Amish community, they're you kind of think of it as like growing up in the 1600s. It's horse and buggy, no electricity, no running water. There's farming. I grew up on a farm, so a lot of really hard work. So, we milk cows by hand every morning and every night. We gathered, all the eggs, and we garden and raise our own animals to then preserve the meat. So beef and pork and chicken and all of that. Um, but there was also a hierarchy between the men and the women. So in the religious part of things with the church, they create their own rules and what you can and can't do, and you're supposed to follow those rules. And the men were the ones that made most of those rules, and the women just were the ones that needed to follow along and agree with. And so the women are very suppressed. They don't have much of a voice. They're kind of looked at, okay, we only get an 8th grade education. So when we go to school, like, we basically learn the basics of math, English, because Pennsylvania Dutch is our first language. So we learned English in school, and we learned German in school because our Bibles and our hymn books
Mm.
are German. So we learned that in school, and then we learned like spelling and reading. But the teachers, the teachers that were teaching us, they came from the same community. So our English and our language was really not that great because it was being taught by them, and it just gets like translated down. And so when I left, I had to learn how to actually like speak properly in English. And you'll hear it still in my accent because my first language was Pennsylvania Dutch, and that's always just going to be a part of me. Do I still speak it? Not a whole lot. I do when I go see my mom, but it's really hard for me. I can speak English a lot better than what I can speak Pennsylvania Dutch now.
What
So, yeah.
what was the average day like for you growing up?
Average day, we get up, 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning, and the first thing we had to do was go to the barn and milk, 10 to 15 cows by hand. So I have 18 siblings, so I come from a really large family, and I have a lot of older brothers. Yeah. Yeah. All from the same parents.
Wow.
So so a big group of us, we would go milk the cows in the morning, and then feed the animals, and then everybody comes together for breakfast at like 8 a.m. So here you have about 20 people that all sit at the same table, and we all have breakfast together, and then you go about your day, and you do farming, gardening, canning, preserving, sewing, like all of those kind of like Laura Ingalls type of
Yeah.
things. And then everybody gets together for lunch, and we all sit at the table together for lunch. Same thing in the afternoon, go back to work, and then in the evening, we have dinner, and everybody gets together and sits at the table again for dinner. And then after dinner, it's back to, you got to go milk the cows again and make sure all the animals are fed, take care of everything there. So that's a pretty typical day.
Wow. And how many people were part of this community total?
I don't even know, because there's so many different, there's a common misconception with the Amish community is that they're all the same, but they're not. And
Mm.
we didn't live on compounds. Like, we had our own, like, I lived on the farm, like 80-acre farm with my family, but there was nobody else that lived there with
Yeah.
us. So it was not compounds, but there's all these different orders of Amish people. And the one that I grew up in was like the most strict. Like, I always call it like the lowest on the totem pole. Like, there's other orders, like they were allowed to have indoor plumbing, they were allowed to have showers and their bathrooms in the house, whereas we weren't. Like, we didn't have that. We had to have the outhouses, and we had to heat up all our own water, and we had to have the original water pumps to get the water from the well underneath, or whatever, wherever it was coming from.
What was
So
your worldview like growing up? Like, did you know that, outside of the farm, there was Target and, Planet Fitness and all these other things roaming around you?
didn't know a lot about those. So we did go to some grocery stores. Like, I remember going to, I don't know if you guys have Aldi where you're
Oh, yeah.
at, but yeah, so we used to go there, and we would buy some things there like flour and sugar, and we bought a lot of cornflakes because cornflakes was pretty common thing that we ate for breakfast,
Yeah.
which is delicious. I still like it, but I don't eat it. So I knew that, but and we would see those things, but understanding it was a whole different story.
Yeah.
So the concept of things that were really far away, like I actually remember when 9/11 happened and I was still at home, and that just felt like it was so far away. Like the concept of it was like it was in another country or something, because it felt like it didn't feel like it was just, over
Yeah, I was gonna
in New
say.
York.
Hmm.
Like it wasn't that far away, but it felt like it was really, really far away.
Wow.
Yeah.
What looking back at your experience there working on the farm and the like you said, pretty much from the time you get up to the time you go to sleep, it's working. How do you think that shaped your work ethic today in terms of you work for yourself?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it because we have such a strong work ethic. There was no like sitting around and just waiting for tomorrow to do something. There was no like, oh, I'll just Netflix today and then tomorrow I'll get it done. No, it was get up and get it done because the cows weren't going to milk themselves and the chickens needed to be fed. So they were expecting you to be there. So what that did is it really instilled the mindset of like, don't push things off, and you just get, even if you don't want to do it, you still go and do it because
Yeah.
that's what's expected. And so that really has transferred over into me showing up for myself and my business, and you just get things done. And people ask me that question all the time, and I'm like, yeah, it has everything to do with it. And it's something that I teach my clients now is like, listen, you can say that you want something, but it's the action and the follow through behind it that's actually going to get you there, not just you saying, I have decided, because you can decide that you want something, but what you do behind that decision is a whole other thing. So the action and the follow through behind it is what's going to get you there, but you have to make sure that you're following through with that.
And also, you talked about the hierarchy with the men
Mm-hmm.
and the women. How exactly was that?
So the women are, we go to eighth grade education,
Hmm.
and both men and women, and then we get promoted to housework. And so we're expected to stay there, do the housework, and then typically get married around anywhere from 19 to 21, or in the 20s, just dependent on if they met someone that they wanted to get married to. And then they just have babies. Like they stay there, and they don't use birth control. So they just go until, which is why my parents had 19 kids. They just go until they can't have any more kids. But with the men, like they are the preachers of the church. They are um the bishop of the church, and they're the ones that kind of like control those rules and come up with new rules, and the women just kind of like put their heads down and say, okay, this is what it is. Or even if they didn't, if the women don't agree with it, they aren't taught how to, they can actually stand up and say, no, I don't agree with that. They're just kind of expected to not say anything and just agree with it and move
Yeah.
on.
And when did you start to plant seeds in your head of, all right, this is not how I want to live my life, and I'm gonna have an escape plan here?
At a very young age, I felt a stir in my spirit of because I questioned a lot of things. I was a troublemaker. I pushed the boundaries on the rules, and I had a lot of questions on like, why are they doing things the way that they are? Why do they believe the things that they believe? And the
Hmm.
answer was always, well, that's just the way it's always been. That's just the way it is. An example would be, they believe that women aren't allowed to cut their hair. They shouldn't cut their hair. And so there was this one lady that would come to our house to buy things, and she loved God. She loved Jesus, and she would talk about that all the time, but her hair was cut really, really short. And the one day when she left, I asked my mom, I said, so she loves God, and just because she cut her hair really short, that means she's not going to go to heaven. And my mom's response was, well, that's just the way it is. And I was like, at that moment, I was like, no,
Yeah.
no, I can't agree with that. I can't get myself to believe in a God like that, because we were taught like he's up there in the sky, waiting to beat us over the head if we do something wrong. And so, and then I started to see, I actually became a member of the church before I left. So when you become a member of the church, you get baptized in, and
Yep.
now you're a member, and now they have more control over you. But I also was able to see how they were treating people a lot more. And I believe now, like the Lord allowed me to become a member in order to see more internal things of what was going on within the church. And it helped me understand that a little more. And so I just remember thinking like, there's no way that I can believe in the God that they're teaching me who he is, because this is not love.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of deconstructing in your mindset after you leave to like get away from that mindset and that fear of it. And so I just sat like, I can't get on board with it. So I think for a few years I knew that I was going to leave at some point. I just didn't know how,
Mm.
because I couldn't really talk to anybody. And it was like, you only know what you know, and what you're going to do once you leave, you have no clue. I didn't have a social security number. I never, went out and had a job and, made my own money or anything like that. So I didn't know what to expect. Um, so yeah.
That's the next part I want to ask you about. So you've decided you're 19 years old, you're going to make this leap of faith, 15-foot jump off of a roof, and decide to run away. Do you remember that day? Like what was going through your mind when you're like, all right, I'm pulling the trigger today. I'm out of here.
Like to a T.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Did,
Yeah.
did anybody else know that you were
No,
going to do this? Or is it just love y'all? See you
no.
later?
So at the time, I had a boyfriend from New York and I was in Ohio. And our way of like, we would only see each other because we were so far away. There was no phones. We couldn't call each other, text each other, or anything like that. So we wrote letters to each other. So every other week, I would send him a letter, and every other week, he would send me a letter. That was our communication. And then we would maybe see each other twice a year. So we really didn't have that much time together. But on this particular day, like we had never talked about leaving. We were both kind of like troublemakers,
Mm-hmm.
but we had never talked about leaving. It was never in any of our conversations. And it wasn't like we could write that in our letters, because we never knew when our parents were going to be like, I'm going to open your letter
Yeah.
and see what you're writing. Like you couldn't trust that. So on this particular day, what's crazy is I knew for a few months leading up to this day that I was going to be leaving. I just knew it in my spirit, and I knew there was a big shift coming. I just didn't know what it was. And I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew in my spirit that something was going to happen. So on this particular day, June 30th, 2004, I was working at my oldest sister's house. She just had a baby, and I was there to help her out. And she because that's something that we did as young women. Like if someone had a baby, we would go to their house and like help them out, kind of like a hired maid. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I was. So I wasn't even at home where I grew up. And on this day, it was my turn to go deliver a letter to my boyfriend. So I go to the mailbox to deliver this letter. And when I opened the mailbox, there was a note in the mailbox that was labeled to me. And it said, owner only, Lizzie. And I knew that I recognized the handwriting. So I knew who it was from. And I opened it, and he said that it was from my boyfriend. And he said that uh, his sister and her boyfriend and my boyfriend drove down the day before from New York with a mutual friend of ours that had left a few years before, and they all ran away. They all left. And if you want to come, we'll come by here tonight at 10 p.m. and we'll pick you up. If you don't want to come, if you don't want to leave, then I'll come by later and I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is your way of saying like, I'll break up with you if you don't leave. But
Ultimatum for you.
yeah, it was an ultimatum, but I literally like snapped my fingers just like that. And I said, I'm leaving. This is my way out. I just knew it was the time, the moment, because 2 years before that, I have a twin sister. And 2 years before, when we were 17, the two of us ran away for 2 days. And I thought that was my time, that I was going to leave and never look back. But she couldn't handle it. Our dad died when we were 13. So it was just my mom with all the siblings at home. And it's like death when someone leaves. It's really, really hard. They mourn you as if you died. And so my twin, a little more soft-hearted, I suppose, was like, I can't put mom through this. I don't
Yeah.
want to do this. And so reluctantly, I went back, knowing that I would leave at some point again, but it took me 2 years to finally leave again. So I had the rest of the day after I read that note. I had the rest of the day to figure out like how I'm going to do it. And also realize like, if I choose to leave, my twin was getting married 6 months later. And I had a decision to make. Like, I could stay for 6 more months so that I could be at her wedding, because I knew if I leave, I wouldn't be at her wedding.
Mhm.
Or I could leave knowing that I wouldn't be able to be at her wedding. And I also and I knew that if I left or if I stayed for 6 more months, there's probably a chance I would never leave. So I knew that this was my only way out, and it was my time, and it was a chance that I had to take. So I didn't tell anybody that was at noon. Didn't tell anybody for the rest of the day, but I really had to think through like how I'm gonna do it, and would I tell anybody? And I didn't. I couldn't, because you don't know what they're going to try to do, if they're going to go tell anybody, and you have to escape
Yeah.
if you're going to leave. So I waited until that night when everybody was going to bed, and I went upstairs to pretend like I was going to bed. And I wrote a little, first thing I did is I wrote a little note, and I said, I have to go. And I said, this has nothing to do with anybody here, not mad at anybody, but this is what I have to do. And when I think about that note that I wrote, I'm like, where did that come from? Because
Mhm.
I intuitively knew at that point in time that I'm not leaving for a reason of anybody else there, other than like, I just know in my spirit that I needed to go, and it was my time.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I did. And then I grabbed a few small belongings. I had $20 I put in my pocket, and I took my covering off. Wish I kept it, but I took it off and left it behind, because it's kind of like a souvenir now.
Yeah.
But I had my dress, and then instead of just like going downstairs, pretending like I needed to, like, I don't know, go to the bathroom outside or something, I was so afraid that someone would know what I was about to do, that I couldn't do that. So that's why I went over to the window. I climbed out on the roof, and I sat there for about 30 minutes contemplating how I'm going to jump off this roof and not break a bone. Because if I jump and I break a bone, it probably means I will never be able to leave. And I'll look like the biggest fool ever in the community, because everybody will know.
I bet your
Um,
heart was like
oh
racing.
man, it's so surreal, because you know the decision that you're making, and you're thinking like, I may never see my family again. I know that I'm not going to be at my twin sister's wedding. And I know a lot of my siblings are going to get married, and there's going to be all these things that I'm not going to be a part of. But my heart and my spirit knew that I had to go forward. And so I finally, this is like a 15-foot roof, and I finally just said, you know what? I got to do it. And on the farm, like, you learn, like, I don't know if you know this or not, but cats rarely ever
Oh yeah,
and
they can
that's
land on their
no
feet.
matter. So like, they can
Yeah.
land they could fall from 40 feet and not
Yeah.
even break a bone. So I knew that, and I knew that they did that because they literally make everything in their body limber.
Mm.
And that's how they're able to not, because the only reason you break bones is because
You lock
you
up.
lock up. And so what I did is I made everything limber and I jumped and avoided breaking a bone. And then
And
I
then
ran.
yeah, then you headed off after that. Have you talked to your family since then?
Yes. So I actually have a really good relationship with my mom. It took her a few years. She still lives in Ohio and I'm in Arizona, so it's not like I see her very often.
Yeah.
But when I do go back there, usually once a year, I make sure that I go see her, and she's amazing.
Yeah.
She There's four of us that left total out of the 19, and she loves it when we come home and see her because she doesn't want anything to get in the way of us coming home to see her, because in her eyes, no matter what the church says, we're still her kids
Yeah.
and she still wants to see us.
What
So
what were the repercussions the first time that you left and came back?
oh, it was so hard. I think it was a few months before I ended up like going back, and it probably took about 2 years of my mom not trying to persuade me
Yeah.
to come back and tell me like I'm not. I remember going home one time and I had like my ears pierced, and she like took me to the bedroom and she's like, "You have to take that out right now." I was
So
like, "Okay, mom."
I'm like so fascinated by the fact, like you said, you jump 15 feet, land with $20 in your pocket, no social security number, eighth grade education. I mean, this feels like something from a movie. And I assume they pick you up at 10 o'clock, you head off. I'm imagining my daughter whenever I moved here from Germany. We were in Germany for 6 years, and she was 6 years old when we left, and she was nearly 12 years old when we got back. Riding down the highway, going to Target. I remember Chick-fil-A, like just heading downtown. She was super culture shocked. And
Mhm.
what was that experience like for you, escaping
Oh
there?
my
And then
goodness.
I can't imagine the amount of culture shock you went through.
It's intense. Because first of all, you're very naive to many, many things around you
Yeah.
because you literally have no idea. You don't know what you don't know. And then all of a sudden you start realizing what you don't know. So there's a couple things that can happen there. For me, I started to kind of like hype myself after I realized like how much I don't know,
Mm,
because that was my way of like I didn't want people to know. Like I didn't want people to think that I was dumb, or I didn't even want to tell people about where I was from. But the initial culture shock, like even just like walking into a room and like turning a light on instead of having to like light a kerosene lamp is
yeah.
like so wild. And then I had never had a shower until after I left. So like at 19 years old, I mean, we took bath, but like not indoor bath. You had to like heat the water, put the hot water and the cold water together in a cold stainless steel tub. Like it's way, way different.
Yeah.
So just taking a shower was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And then I got introduced to microwaves and I was like, I can microwave a lean cuisine and I don't have to cook a meal from scratch. Yeah, let's do it. It didn't turn out very well. After a while, I'm like, this isn't gonna go well. This is not great for my
Did you
health.
put a fork in there?
I put a fork in there. Yep.
Okay.
Now I avoid microwaves at all costs. I'm like, don't come near me.
Yeah. What besides a microwave and the or a fork in the microwave, what is something that you look back on and you're like, oh my gosh, that's embarrassing from that transition?
I don't know why this one specific thing just stands out to me every single time, but we didn't go out to eat really
Yeah.
ever. And so at home, we called, like when it was wheat bread, we would call it brown bread instead of wheat bread.
Yeah.
So I remember going to a Subway and I was like, I want the brown bread. And the person was like, what are you talking about?
They're
And
all
then
brown.
later on, they're all brown.
Yeah.
And later on, I was like, someone was like, "Oh, it's because it's called wheat bread, wheat or white bread or whatever." I was like, "Oh," and that is the one thing that just like stands out to me every single time.
I'll try it next time I go in Subway.
I want brown bread.
Tell them I want the brown bread. Yeah, and then I'll get mad if they don't know what I'm talking about.
Well,
Talk
the
about your
ex-Amish girl said it was brown
yeah.
bread.
It's exactly how I'll word it too. Talk about getting your GED.
Oh, yeah, that was a few years after I had left. So I was really, really fortunate. A few days after I left, I got a job as a dishwasher at a restaurant.
Okay.
And I still didn't have my social security number, so they just paid me under the table until I had that. And then I got connected to this couple that was former Amish and they had left like 5 years before. And so they were established and my one of my friends connected me with them and was like, "Hey, can she come live with you guys, until, things are figured out, she's on her feet." And they're like, "Yeah, come live with us. You can pay $50 a month for rent. And we'll provide the food, we'll help you get your car, your driver's license, all of those things." And I said, "Okay." So 2 months later, I had my social security number, I had my car, and I had a driver's license, and I moved out.
Oh wow.
I know, wild. It's like I think about that, I'm like, that's actually really crazy.
Now, was your name Lizzie Ens, or did you get to pick a new name, or how exactly did
No,
that?
my name was Lizzie, but my maiden name was Hirschberger.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you
pretty common Amish name.
so like no birth certificate, nothing like that.
No, so we did have birth certificates, but they were hidden, so I could not find it. Like I wouldn't have known where my parents had put it, so I had to go to the health department and pay like $25 for my birth certificate. So I needed three forms of identification for my social security: a birth certificate and my uh birth records or medical records from when I was born, which was the only medical record that I had. So I had to
Yeah.
go find the doctor that was my mom's doctor when I was born and get my medical records from their
Wow.
office. And
Yeah.
then my eighth grade education card, which I had to wait to go home and get it until I knew it was a Sunday that everybody was going to church. And then I had to go home and get my eighth grade education card.
Oh,
That's how I got
how
my social
nerve
security.
wracking was that?
Oh my gosh, it was crazy.
This is why you want to be
It's
an agent.
exactly.
Stories like that. The music's playing as you like look around the corner and everything.
Yeah, I could
Okay.
totally do it.
It's
But then my GED, like, so when I lived with that couple, she was studying to become a nurse.
mhm.
And they started to talk to me about, listen, you can go get your study to get your GED. And I didn't even really know what that was.
Yeah.
But I knew it was something that they said, if you want more education, if you want to go to college someday or whatever it is that you want to do, you do need your GED. So it took me a few years because those first few years, you're really just exploring a lot of things. And so it took a while. So 2 or 3 years, and then I went and got my GED, and I had the most amazing teacher ever. And it was the most nerve-wracking thing ever because I had never studied science, history. What the heck was algebra? I still don't understand it, but I passed everything. So on the first try, so that was good. Um, and I did it was a really good experience, but also one of those things where it was like incredibly uncomfortable
Yeah.
because you just it was something that you never done before or never even like been in that kind of setting before.
As an instructor, I have to ask you this because you said it. What was it about your teacher that made them amazing?
You're a GED instructor?
No, no, no. For the Air
Just an
Force.
instructor in general?
Yep.
She really like took care of me and understood like where I was coming from and how sheltered I was.
Hmm.
And there was no like shaming or demeaning behind it. It was like, I understand, like, you had an eighth grade education, but you've never learned about science before. You've never learned about history before. And I had never heard of an essay before. So I had to learn how to like write an essay. And I was like,
Yeah.
I have literally no clue. So she just was really, really in tune with that. And at the end of me graduating, she gave me like the honors roll
Hmm.
because of how much work and effort I put into learning the things that I wanted to learn. And then she was the first person ever to ask me, Lizzie, what do you want to do? Like basically like what you would ask your kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to
Yeah.
be?
Yeah.
And she
Aspirations.
was, yeah, and she asked me that specific question. I couldn't answer it because nobody had ever asked me that. I was like, well, I don't know. She's like, do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to college? What do you want to study? I discovered that I loved science when I was in my GED classes. I hated history. I like history now, but I did not. I was like, what is this doing for me? I don't, what? It wastes of space in my brain. I don't need to know these things. Now I enjoy it. But the science was something that really captivated me, which is why I then went into the field that I did, but because it was very specifically like science of the human body and how those things work.
Yeah, it brings me to the next piece was fitness. And you got some pretty interesting concepts that I like, especially. So I have a background as a physical therapy assistant.
Mm-hmm.
I did personal training for about 10 years as
Mm-hmm.
well. So things such as undiet yourself. So talk to us about that.
Yes. So UnDiet Yourself came to me in 2020. Like a lot of things came to people in
Yeah.
2020. But I was a personal trainer for first. I studied personal training first, started working as a trainer at a small studio here in Phoenix. And I ended up being there for 6 years until I launched my own business.
Hmm.
Um, and in my first year of training, I realized there is so much more to our health than just going to the gym and working out for an hour a day. Like the rest of your hours are actually what matter the most.
Yeah.
So I ended up studying holistic health and I got certified as a holistic health coach. And that really allowed me to dive into, and I learned like how bad the dieting industry is. And I came from a background of crash dieting and trying all these, crazy diets just to have like quick results. But like at the end of the day, they didn't really teach you anything other
Yeah.
than you like wreaked more havoc on your body, which then caused more health issues for me down the road. And so the concept that I started uh, working on and going into is like, you don't actually need to be on a diet in order to be healthy. And in fact, many diets that you do go on create more issues than what they help, whether it's physical or mental, because there's a lot of the mental aspect behind that as well. So undiet yourself is this whole concept of like getting rid of the dieting mindset and that you have to be attached to a specific label or a diet in order to be healthy or to see results. And how to actually go back to the basics of our nutrition and the physiology of our body and like what it actually looks like to fuel and nourish our body, how they used to way, way, way back in the day before all the diets were out there trying to convince us of anything else. So what does that even look like in a sustainable, healthy way? And it looks different for each individual because
Absolutely.
we are bio individuals. And so if and depending on your health things that you have going on, if you're someone that has severe gut imbalances or hormone imbalances or hypothyroidism, insulin resistance, your diet is going to look different because there are certain things that are going to come and play with that, which is actually what I specialize in. Um, Undiet yourself is just kind of like the foundation of it all, and then I go in and specialize in the hormones and the gut and all of that fun stuff.
Speaking of diets, because I know it's weird. Everybody always says like religion, uh, sports, politics, those are very sensitive subjects that people
Mm-hmm.
get triggered with. I've noticed the more I talk to people about eating right, sleep, just health in general, people get very defensive
Oh yeah.
talking about that. Is I don't need that much sleep, or I don't need no that. this diet works for me, it's going to work for you too. Why is that we get so irked and so defensive when it comes to, like you said, all of our bodies are different.
Yeah.
Everybody's is. Not one diet works for somebody else. I mean, it's just everything's so
Yeah.
it's interesting to me.
I think people want to be right,
Yeah.
because like, but the reality is if you are someone that hasn't studied the body and the nutrition part of things and how things actually work and the physiology behind everything, just because a diet like worked for you doesn't mean that it's going to work for another person.
Yeah.
And so people like to get on this, I don't like to call it a bandwagon, but it kind of is.
Like
The
fad
diet industry,
diets.
like yeah, fat diets, and
Yeah.
it can become cultish. Like the carnivore
Yeah.
diet is making its way back, and it can become this like cultish thing where it's like do or die. It's like, oh, I'm carnivore, like
I saw it
I
on
only eat
TikTok. It
meat.
works.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a very, very misleading and also scary because most people that come to me, they're in information overload of
Hmm.
all the things that they're seeing. And I try to be really, really careful, to not be so extreme one way or the other,
Yeah.
which is also why most people that come to me, that's the reason that they come to me, because it's like, no, let's talk about some common sense here. And let's just get back to the foundation of like, what's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Because that's going to look different. And with the way that I eat, somebody else is probably not going to want to eat like that, but I eat like that because that's what makes you feel good. So at the end of the day, what you really need to focus on is what's going to make you feel good.
Yeah.
What's going to give you energy, what's going to have you sleeping well, what's going to, have you see the results that you want, reduce the inflammation, because what causes inflammation in one person's body is not going to cause inflammation for anybody else.
Yep.
So really what you want to think about and focus on is keeping the inflammation in your body at minimum and at bay. And what are those things that are causing that?
Yeah.
It's different for each person.
What about fill the gap? Actually, I like that where you were talking about don't just cut sodas, for example,
Mhm.
replace it with water, like fill
Yep.
that gap. So talk to us about that.
Fill the gap. Filling the gap means if you are, let's just say you're addicted to soda.
Hmm.
Okay. So when you just pull the soda away and you don't replace it with anything else, it's going to feel really, really empty. Because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that's a hole there. What do I do with it? And it can feel really, really depriving. So the way that I like to think of that is like, instead of focusing on pulling the soda away, we're going to focus on you're probably not drinking enough water. So what we're going to do is integrate things in. And when we integrate the good in and bring in the things that are going to serve and nourish and heal your body, we naturally start crowding out the things that are
Mhm.
not as healthy because we don't have room for it. So it's the concept of the same concept would go with most people, especially women, don't eat enough protein. And so when they're not eating enough protein, they find themselves craving the sugars, craving the carbs, craving all the things that they think is bad.
Yeah.
And some of them probably aren't, if you're eating Sour Patch Kids and Snickers every day, like, yeah, that's not that great for you. But why is it that you're craving those? There's a
Mhm.
reason why you're always craving those. One, it'd be like if I were to start eating croissants for breakfast every morning, I would wake up and probably crave croissants because the
Yeah.
brain wants that dopamine hit. But what can happen is typically when I start working with my clients is the first thing that we're going to focus on is where's your protein at? And let's see how we can up your protein because 9 times out of 10 they're already not eating enough. As soon as we start bringing their protein up and having them focus on bringing in the protein, their cravings start to go down and they're all of a sudden like, okay, I actually don't need as much coffee as I was drinking. Some of them completely stop drinking coffee. I don't even tell them to do it. They just do because they're like, I guess I don't really need it.
Yeah.
um and then they're like, I don't have any cravings for sugar anymore, or it's very minimized because the protein actually comes in and satiates them. and is giving their body what it needs. Where it's so funny that we don't go, I'm not eating enough protein. Let me, like, I'm craving protein. It's actually when you don't eat enough protein, you start craving the simple carbs, because the
Yeah.
carbs are what are going to give you that quick energy. And that's what the body wants, is like, I don't have enough energy.
Feel tired. Yeah, that brain
Mm-hmm.
fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. What about women who say, well, I don't want to eat that much protein. I don't want to bulk up.
Oh, yeah. That's a misconception.
Yeah.
The only way you bulk up is if you go to the gym and you lift really, really heavy and you break that muscle down and you tear it down and then you allow it to repair and you eat in excess.
Yeah.
It's not the protein.
Yeah. I hear that. I used to hear that if I start to up my protein game a little bit, I'm going to get swole. And I
No.
love the people who, this one too. And I'm not making fun of anybody out there. I'm saying this is
Yeah.
in terms of misconceptions. Um, you know, for example, and it's in women, I've heard it from the most is, well, I don't want to touch the weights. I don't want to do this because I'm going to get absolutely jacked overnight. So I want to stay. I'm just going to stick to cardio and not touch the weights because I don't want to, end up looking like China or something. What is your philosophy in terms of cardio versus weightlifting?
I think it's individual. Cardio, it depends on where your body is at. And if you, let's just say you're someone that is in constant fight or flight and your cortisol is like all messed up
Mm-hmm.
and you're in adrenal fatigue, you're probably going to want to stay away from cardio. And one of the things that has actually like made a lot of women go into phase 1 or phase 2 adrenal fatigue is by doing so much HIIT training and under eating at the same time.
It
So
releases
not
cortisol doing that.
exactly. Yeah. So not eating enough, which is very common, and then doing that excess training, HIIT training, where it's like that quick stuff where you're releasing more cortisol, that will eventually lead into hormone imbalances, thyroid conditions, and all of a sudden they're going to find themselves in adrenal fatigue if they don't take care of it. So when it comes to cardio versus weight training, at that point in time, they're probably going to have to slow it down and minimize cardio, or primarily depends on the stage of adrenal fatigue that they would be in. They can do walking. I've had women that I worked with that literally lost like weight every single week just by walking, and we didn't allow them to do anything other than that for the first 4 to 8 weeks because they were so tired they couldn't. But just by walking, getting that movement in, and then really focusing on the nutrition part of things, they were able to heal their body. And so there's a time and a place for it. But as far as being afraid that the weights are going to like bulk you up, listen, I'm a testament of that. I've been weight training since 2014, so almost 10 years. And before that, I ran marathons, and I did it because I loved it. And then I did a full marathon and I was like, I'll never do that again. That's way too much work. I got introduced to weight training, went to training school, and it completely changed my physique, but never was I ever bulky, and I lift some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to know if weightlifting makes me bulky, like just come talk to me, because I will tell you that it is actually the one thing that will shape your body in a way that cardio will not do, if
That
that's
is
something
true.
that you want.
Oh yeah, you can pinpoint a certain body part
Mm-hmm.
and just really isolate it. Yeah, I love going in there and knowing that the weights can kick my butt
Yeah.
in a workout. And it's a challenge and I can keep coming back and they're just going to get stronger and stronger every single time.
Yeah.
They're going to go up
Oh man,
more.
I did like yesterday. I haven't done any kind of plyo stuff in a while because
Yeah.
I was going through my own healing journey, and yesterday for the first time, I was like, you know what? Let me mix some of this in here, and it because that's the fast twitch stuff, and I hadn't done any of the fast twitch stuff in a while, and I walked out and I was like, oh my God, I forgot what that felt like. I was like, I can't walk, because I love some heavy lifting and I will go lift heavy, but that's still different than using those fast twitch muscles, which is also important. Like you have
Yeah.
to have a nice balance, but I personally have to force myself to make sure I do some cardio because I just like, I see that look on your
I
face.
hate,
You're like,
yeah,
don't tell me I have to do
I,
cardio.
I hate cardio. I hate cardio. It's crazy too because I can look at my legs and I'm like, I'm not happy with my legs. I'm happy with everything else. And I'll go in and I'll kill legs for weeks. And I'm like, all right, I like where my legs are. I need to work on my back a little bit more. And I'll crush back for weeks. And then I take those as like personal challenges. You can come
Mm-hmm.
up to me tomorrow and be like, you suck at cardio. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
I
You're
just,
like, I don't like it.
I get bored with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only time I've ever enjoyed it is if I go somewhere, like if I'm traveling, like if we were at San Antonio over the summer and I got up and I went running around downtown San Antonio in the Riverwalk and I ran for miles and miles and miles and was not gassed. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, you put me on a treadmill somewhere and I'm like, screw this, I'm done. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go lift.
Yeah. My yeah, if the weights are in the same room, I will probably like be on there for, and then one of the best
Yeah.
actually fat burning things you can do is get on the treadmill on like a really, really high incline, 10, 12, 15 incline, and you walk, on a
3.5, 4.
3.5 or whatever your
Yeah.
speed is, and it will make you sweat like
Yeah.
crazy if you're on there, but it's so boring.
It really is. It is. Yeah. It's absolutely. But kudos to. I have much respect for anybody out there who can crush.
100%. Like if you
Yeah.
love that, and sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. You maybe you put something on, you watch a show or something, and you know just do it anyway.
Yeah. That's be a good
Oh.
podcast. The Shadows podcast. But
Yeah, the
so
shadows. Yeah, listen to the shadows podcast.
there you go. Do that. It increases your cardio by 34%. Um, so have you heard of or actually played around with blood flow restriction training?
Personally, I have not. I do remember when we were in personal training school. I feel like we did a little bit of it, but I actually have a good friend of mine who's a trainer in Philadelphia, and I just recently saw a video that he did, and I was like, oh, I forgot about that. He was doing it on his biceps. I was like, oh my gosh. So no, I personally don't get like super creative with all that stuff.
Yeah,
Um, but I know a lot of people that do.
I love it.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of that?
Hmm. I do it for
Yeah.
legs and I do it for arms. I'll wear them up here, but I don't do them too tight. I do it just enough to where I can slide like two fingers
Yeah.
under. I got them on Amazon for like $15, and you only wear them for like 10, 15 minutes, but it builds up the lactic acid in the part that you're isolating, and then
Hmm.
you just go really light lifting. So I'll curl the straight bar or I'll curl 10, 15 pounds, hammer curls really slow with them. And even I've started to do shoulders lately. Started to do it for shoulders and
Interesting.
legs. I do body weight squats or squat just the bar. And they're great on leg extensions, but yeah, you feel it. And it is you finish and you take them off and your legs are just trembling. It is a whole nother feeling. Your arms feel real swole. It's pretty good. I did a lot of research in it before I started, and then I went on Amazon. I've been using them for about 2 to 3 years now, but love them.
Do you feel like it helps with muscle growth?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
I
do.
probably won't do that on my biceps. I don't really need my biceps to be bigger, but I
It's a
can
good
see
problem to have. That's that's going to be the quote for this week's episode. I don't need my biceps to be bigger. But yeah, it's
I can't
definitely.
wear my jackets if I have two big biceps.
Oh, final fitness question before we move on to your book. What do you think about pre-workout? What's your take on pre-workout?
So, if you drink coffee, just stick with that.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
like,
people do it.
yeah, I I used to do pre-workouts, and am I against them? No. I mean, I think I have one right now called Rooted Energy, and it's super, super clean. So it doesn't have like a lot of caffeine in it, but a lot of them, like, they're kind of like a Monster Energy drink. They're just like not too great for you. Now, I do remember when I was in training school, I used one that had niacin in it, and it gave you that kind of like flush. I think it's niacin that does that.
Mhm.
Um, and it did really help me where I was able to lift heavier and go stronger. But I don't necessarily feel like now that it would do any different for me than drinking coffee
Yeah,
if I wanted like a little extra boost. So I think you can get carried away. on a lot of them, especially if you're drinking C4. Like that's
Yeah.
I just don't think that that's just really great for you. Um, so I personally wouldn't get carried away on them. Like
I
keep it as
remember
simple as possible.
Bull Knocks with the nitric oxide. It was like, this was when I was in tech school. So this had to be like 2009. But I remember I was in my dorm. I was taking Bull Knocks and I shook the bottle up and I left it sitting there. And I went to go grab my shoes or something. And the cap just blew off of it. And it was all over the place. And at the time I'm like, oh wow, this is good stuff. And I chugged it down and went and worked out. But now I look back and I'm like, that could not have been good for me. That
Yeah.
I was drinking a nuclear bomb and going and working out. But
I think creatine is really good.
yeah,
Can be really good. And that's not necessarily a pre-workout. I don't know that it I mean
I
I
get
use
bloated.
it, but it depends on the person.
Yeah,
Some people it does do that. Maybe it depends on the type of creatine or just your digestion. Some people just have it has that effect on them.
guy I
But
work with swears by creatine.
yeah.
Oh, that's all he talks about. Yeah,
He all he talks about is creatine.
yeah. I hope he's listening to this too, because that's all he talks about is creatine. Anytime you talk
Oh,
fitness,
he's so happy I brought it up.
I know. We'll move on to your book. All right, so so now let's actually, I do want to talk about your book, Escaping My Reflection: A Pilgrimage from Suppression to Freedom. I actually like the cover too. With the
Thank
I'm big
you.
on book covers, but I like that
Yeah.
with the mirror. So talk to
Yeah.
us. What It's kind of a two-part question here. What made you decide to write a book? And then looking back, like you said, eighth grade level of education when you left, would you have ever thought in your wildest dreams that you're an author?
No, not even close. So took a few years. So back in 2016, when I was still working as a personal trainer, I also trained for a local corporate company, their employees. And each year they would put on a TEDx talk for their employees.
Okay.
And one of the employees found out a little bit about my story, and he was like, "You need to be one of the speakers at our next TEDx event." And it was the first time that I had never done any kind of public speaking or anything like that. And so I pursued it, and they wanted me to come talk because of my story. Um, so I go do that TEDx talk, and something after I did that, it was a 20-minute talk. And after I got off of that stage, I literally went, this is what I'm meant to do. Like
Mm,
I will be on more stages eventually. I just didn't know how and when. And so after that story came out, like I wasn't allowed to make it public, but after, my close friends and my clients like found out about that, I would get approached all the time, like, you need to write a book. And I always knew that I would write a book eventually. I just needed to be ready. One, there's some really, personal things in there and trauma and all of that stuff. And I had to be at a place where I felt okay going back there, and I had to go through a certain healing phase before I was able to go there and actually write about the things.
yeah.
And so for the last few years, actually about 2 years ago, I started talking about it on my Instagram. I started talking about like I did these like funny reels in my Amish clothes, and it just like went viral and went crazy. And so like I kept feeding into it. And so I would share
Got to
stories.
give people what they want.
Yep. And so I shared a lot of stories, and again, people are like, you need to write a book. Like, I want to read your book, because you can only share so much on social media. And there's always things, that people read between the lines. You get hate along with love. And so last fall, I had not been on another stage. I had done a couple podcast interviews from people because of social media, found out a little bit about it. And then last fall, here in Phoenix, I did a speaking competition that a friend of mine invited me to. And I said, all right, this is my time. I'm going to go do this. And so I did that. And when I did that, I met my publisher there.
Hmm.
And his name's Ken Rashawn, and he's amazing. His company is Perfect Publishing. And we connected at the event, and he asked me, he's like, "Do you have a book?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Not yet, but you will." And so because I spoke at the event, and he realized parts of my story, and he's like, "You have to write a book. Like, it's a must." And it was at that moment in time during that event and then meeting him that I realized that it was time. It was time for me to write. And so we put a game plan together. I hired him. And then in the same time frame, I get invited to go speak at an event in DC in December, which was only a few months later. And the turns out the guy that was putting the event on also knew my publisher. And so my publisher says, "Okay, this changes everything. We're going to move really, really fast. And we're going to launch your book in December." And I was like, "Are you crazy?" And he's like, "You can do it." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm doing this." So I wrote the book in 2 weeks.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So I wrote this book in 2 weeks. And now I just got done doing an updated version of it, and I added some to it because I did it really fast and it's really good. But I wanted to add a little bit more and an updated version of it. So I just finished that, and we'll have an updated version later this year.
If somebody wants a copy of your book, where can they go to?
LizzieEns.com.
Okay. Then we will have that in the episode description. Are you gonna do an audiobook?
Yes, in a couple weeks.
Really?
I'm traveling to Vermont in a couple weeks, and I'm gonna go record it in an Audible. I'm so excited.
Wow. So it's actually gonna
Yeah.
be you. It's not gonna be some guy like, and I jumped
Yeah,
off the roof.
100. It will be my voice. You'll get to hear my emotions, my voice, all
Wow.
translated by me. Yep.
Wow. I bet that's got to be very, very therapeutic in a way, writing a book and putting this onto paper and just getting the feelings like out of your body. And
Yeah.
how was
It's
that
so
process mentally?
it's yeah, it's really surreal because I basically what I did is I said, "Okay, Lord, like I don't want to write a book just to write a book. This book has to have a purpose behind it, and it has to be able to help people.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that you need me to put on here, like just channel through me, and I'll put it out there." And so that's what I did, and that's also why I was able to write as fast as I could, because I would just sit down, tune everything else out, and say, "All right, Holy Spirit, here, what do I need to write?" And I would just dump it out. um and but what I realized during that time is, because of a lot of the trauma that is in it and a lot of the really personal things that are in there, there's things in there I had no idea I was going to even put in the book. But it just like, hey, it's supposed to be in there. That's what it was meant to be. And I realized at that point in time that I really had done a lot of healing already, because I was able to write, go through the process of the emotions of writing it, even though it was some of the things were really hard. I was able to do that, close my computer, and go to sleep, because it wasn't holding anything over me anymore.
Yeah.
And I had like, it doesn't, with trauma, like there's always going to be triggers, there's always going to be things that happen, but it doesn't hold as much to you anymore if you've gone through the healing parts of it.
Right. Okay. And also, they can find out more about you from you do virtual training, right?
Yep.
That's inter-
So I all my coaching is via telehealth, virtual, whatever you want to call it. Um, so if anybody wants to find me, like you really find a lot of me on Instagram, but um, I'm on Facebook too, but I don't talk as much about my coaching stuff on Facebook.
Now, do they
Yeah.
need what do they need if they want to do virtual coaching? Like, do they have to have a gym membership? Do they have to have a home gym?
They can have a gym membership, a home gym, either one, because that's part of my program. So it's very individualized based on like what that person is needing. And then really they just need themselves, like showing up and allowing me to help them. Because my program is very heavily. I do labs for people too. So that's part of my program is I'm able to get those labs done and really see like what's going on internal. And then that allows me to fine tune their plan even more. And they get to be inside a coaching app that I use and have, that connection with me there and a plan and all of that fun
I like
stuff.
that. So it's not just, hey, you hop on here, we're gonna do side raises,
Mm,
front raises, rear, and call it a
no.
day.
Really, the training part and the workout part is like a really small fraction of it. It's
Yeah.
part of the program, but like my main focus is the nutrition part and the healing part of the body.
What about the importance of sleep? We haven't talked about sleep, and I always like to.
Oh my gosh. So important. So, so important. And it's something that I like really focus heavily on for myself and my clients because sleep is where your body rests and digests and restores.
Yeah.
And if you, I mean, anybody can attest to this. If you don't not getting a lot of sleep, like you don't feel well and you start craving different things because
Mhm.
like the thing that you crave when you are tired and sleep deprived is simple carbs because your body needs the energy. And
Yeah.
so sleep is so important if you want to heal your gut, your hormones, your thyroid, and you want to have energy, like literally anything, raise your testosterone, like you need sleep.
Yeah. Have you read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker?
I have not.
I love.
Is it
I've said
is
it
it
on the podcast so
amazing?
many times, and it's. I've actually let someone borrow it right now. I need to get it back, but I've read it like 3 times. Phenomenal
Why
book.
We Sleep. I'm gonna
Why
have to
We
look that
Sleep.
one up.
Yep, Matthew Walker.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, awesome book. All right, couple of final questions for you. What is something that rephrase that? I'll scratch that out when I edit. What are you most grateful for?
My son.
Awesome. How old's your son?
He's 4
4. Oh, so
and
you're
he's
going.
amazing.
So sleep is very important for those first
Sleep.
couple of years.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's amazing. But the reason that I'm so grateful for him is because he's my teacher. He teaches me so many things. And like before I got pregnant with him, I didn't even know if I wanted to have kids. And then I had him and it changed everything.
I
So yeah.
I tell people all the time that are about to be like brand new parents. I'm like, I can't explain it, but when you have a kid, something you change completely,
Mhm.
100%, and your entire mindset and worldview just shifts.
It
So it's
should.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it's instant. You like hold them, you see them, and it's yeah, you hear that
Oh
click,
yeah.
everything about you's changed.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, it's just I think one of the things that I've done since he was born from the beginning is really learned how to embrace each stage
Yeah,
and like really tune into like what it is that he's not just what he's learning but also like what is this teaching me and seeing things from their perspective as well because it's a completely different way of growing up from how I grew up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And end of the day, what do you want your legacy to be? Someone mentioned your name 50 years from now. What do you want them to say about you?
That I never gave up and that I lived life with love
Simple but
to
powerful.
change the world. Simple
Yeah,
but powerful. Because if you can't lead with love, what do you got?
yeah. Well,
Because if you like you never give up and then you lead with love, like you're gonna change people's lives.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, like we're gonna change people's lives by doing that. But the thing about leading with love is it can look so many different ways. But I like to think of the way Jesus led with love and how he walked and he wasn't here to condemn people of their choices and what they were doing wrong. He was here to love people, and I just think that more of us should be doing that.
final comments for our listeners out there.
Sometimes when you're in the middle of needing to make a decision, all you need to do is jump and never look back.
Oh, I see what you did there. Okay. All right. Yeah, because you have it, what's the it's something about just jump, or is it your just jump
Mm-hmm.
moment, or
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yep. That's kind
Yeah,
of the theme of the book is
okay.
just jump. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, folks, check out our book, grab a copy of it. We're going to have link in the episode description, get you some one-on-one coaching while you're at it. But ma'am, thank you so much for taking time to do this. Folks, that is going to conclude this episode. We'll see you next week for another episode of the Shadows Podcast.